And I'm going to hand it over to Samantha. Thank you so much for presenting for us today. Oh, and
Of
then
course.
just one reminder, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat and I can call them out to Samantha during the session. Or if you prefer to raise your hand, we'll see that you have a question and call on you. Thanks.
And also stay till the end because we have a attendance link that we will put in that we want to hear back from you, and it enters you into a raffle to win a $75 gift card. But I will share my screen. Can everybody see my screen? Fantastic. Okay. So today we're going to go through and talk about how to create a REDCap database that statisticians will love. Basically, just how you can create a database that on the back end is easy for statisticians to be able to pull your data and analyze it. Because one of the biggest issues that we face as statisticians is actually getting data that is clean or and ready for us to be able to start analyzing it. So having a database, especially through REDCap, which is just a great tool to create databases, and there's so many different functionalities. But I wanted to give you some tips and tricks on how to create a database that exports out clean, ready to analyze data, analyzable data. So I'm going to talk about best practices for database development, some data, variable format, and naming consistencies, and then how to create a database based off the information that you want to collect. So essentially, this last part, I'm going to talk about some data that we would want to collect, and then we're going to go to REDCap, and I'm going to show you how to not to avoid some of the pitfalls that potentially happen during database creation. So some best practices is one of them is minimize redundancy. So what this means is that you don't want to ask the same question on multiple different surveys and multiple different forms if it's something that is not going to be changed over time. So for example, if you're asking for race, you don't want to ask race in in one form and then ask race in another form, because you could potentially run into a situation where if it's a survey or even it's a coordinator that's entering the information, there could be a mistake where in one race they say white, in the other one they say other. And so then you're in this case in the back end, like which one is correct. So you want to avoid that, those kinds of situations where you're asking the same questions in multiple different places. If you do want to ask similar questions at multiple different time points, you want to create a longitudinal database, and I will show you how to do that in REDCap. Therefore, you have one form, and you just can have it be asked at multiple different time points. So the questions are the same, the answers are the same, the formats are the same, and everything is the same. And then on the back end for the statistician, we will know exactly which time point that these questions were answered. Another big one is to test the database. And I know this might seem very simple thought, but you want to test it from both perspectives. So you want to test it, say, if you're just creating a survey that's going to be sent out to participants, you want to make sure that you have multiple people that are going to be receiving that survey and testing it, because, and again, you want diversity in the type of people who are going to be reviewing it, because you want to make sure that you're asking questions in a way that makes sense, that the format and the flow is easy to understand. If it's just from, again, a coordinator's perspective, you still want multiple people to look at it, not just you, because you will miss, if you're the one that created the database, and I've done this too, you've looked at it for so long, done so many things, that you're going to miss very small things that really make a difference on the front end while people are entering in the data. So you want to have somebody else look through every single, even put in a test participant and go through every single form, every single question, and have them take notes. And then you guys come together and, fix anything that might be a mistake. The other thing that you want to do is you want to have, a data manager or a statistician or a biostatistician, someone to look at on the back end to check things that maybe you weren't thinking of, like variable names. You don't want variable names that are too long, but you want variable names that are specific to what the question is asking. You want to, and this is something we're going to talk about a little later, you want to make sure formats are the same. You want to make sure, maybe you're putting in an integer for a lab value, but you don't have limits on it, right? And so this is something on the back end that the statistician would go through and look at every single variable to make sure that on the back end, when we receive the data, it makes sense. And you're trying to catch anything that might be a mistake up front instead of us in the back end trying to fix things and sending queries to you about, hey, this number seems too big, or this number seems too small, or this data is missing. So that's why it's really good to have multiple people be reviewing your database from both perspectives. Forms should be organized based on the data that you're collecting. So you don't want to have, your lab data, your demographics data, like perceived stress scale or anything like that, just in like one ginormously long form. Mostly from the front end on your part, because that is going to be really difficult to use. So you want to make sure that you have forms, like you have a demographic form, and then you have a consent form, and then you have, an enrollment form, or based on the information that you're asking for. And we'll go over this when we talk about creating a database. A big one as a statistician is avoid free text fields. On the back end, this is very, very, very difficult for us to parse through and be able to get meaningful information from. Not that we can't do it, but on the front end for you, what you would want to think about is what you're trying to get from this information, what is important. So if you're saying, for example, we're asking for age. So instead of having somebody write in age where there could be a lot of different mistakes, you can actually make it like a radio choice option or a drop down option where somebody can then choose their age, or the coordinator can choose the age. Or you can have if you're allowed to collect PHI, it's a lot better to have the date of birth and date of enrollment, because then on the back end, we can get a very exact age using those dates, right? But you don't want somebody just to write it in, because you could get something that's like 018 year, and then 018, or 18 years, or 18 YRS, right? And so there's multiple, if you have it written in, it could be multiple different types of entries. And so the idea is to keep things very standardized. You want things to be consistent throughout your database. You want to avoid free text fields throughout the whole as often as you can. A lot of times the free text fields are going to be something related to other. So say you ask a question, there's the multiple options, but there's always like another option. So say you're asking about medications, have you been taking the following medications? And you have like 10 medications listed. Then you have an other option. And so somebody can click that and then type in something else. But if you have like the main information that you're trying to collect, you want that to be easily identified, easily chosen, and then you can have another option where you can have a write-in. And I briefly talked about this, don't mix data types in an entry field. So for example, like a lab value. So say we wanted to talk about blood pressure. Again, this goes back to like writing it in. You would want to have the value be one question and the unit be another question. Or unless you're saying, this is the unit that we explicitly want you to put into this free text, right? But a lot of times you're asking for like medication. If you're putting in like medication information, you could have questions of what's the medication, what's the dosage, and it could be 10 milligrams per whatever, or it could be some other kind of unit. So you would want to have a different question that specifies the unit. You don't want it, again, to be all in a write-in. You don't want to have integers and characters in the same data type, in the same entry field. IDs. So this is really important because they are just how we can identify different people, different observations inside a database. So depending on what kind of study that you're running. So for example, especially in REDCap, you can have automatic IDs that are created for you, it's super great. But you can also create your own IDs. A big one is don't make the IDs too long. They just become very cumbersome to deal with. So a rule is to keep it less than 15 characters. And if you are going to do collect screening data as well as enrollment information in the same database, you want to be able to also have another ID that is specific for those that are being enrolled into the study. So you could say use the REDCap ID as just the overall screening number, but then if somebody is enrolled into the study, in one of your other forms, you create an ID that is specific for people enrolling into the study. If you have multiple sites that you are entering data, I've done this in the past where I have specific numbers that within the ID that are associated with each site. So say I would have 01-001. So this is site 1, first patient. And then, site 2 is 02. So it'd be 02-001. So site 2, first patient. So then that's easy for you to look at, but it's also good for us on the back end to be able to parse through what site is what. Include field notes. So I'll show you this within REDCap, but this is really important, especially with your being specific about formats. So like we were talking about the value of, say, you wanted blood pressure in a field note, you can say it's millimeters per HG, which I should know what that is, but I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But you can put that in the field note, or if it's milliliter per deciliter or milligram per deciliter or whatever it is, or you're saying like you want age in months or age in years if you are going to do a write-in. So you want to be able to have a field note there that is specific to, as a reminder, to what unit or format you want this information in. And then have a plan for missing data. So either have an option that it's missing, or somebody refused to answer, or they don't know. So therefore you're going through, and therefore again on the back end, so you have a statistician or a biostatistician that is reviewing your data, they can know whether something is missing, meaning that it was not answered, versus it is like refused or they didn't complete it. Because on the back end, that helps you being like, hey, this person didn't answer this specific question, or they didn't answer anything in this form. And instead of me being like, oh, yeah, they didn't have answers to any of those. It's not actually missing, but they just didn't answer those questions because they weren't relevant to them. You want to be able to distinguish between the two, because we can't help you collect missing data if needed if we don't know for sure that it's missing or not. So it limits the need for a lot of back and forth between you and your statistician saying, is this missing? Is this not missing? So have an option there saying, refused, it is missing. That means that the question was answered. We just don't have an answer for it, if that makes sense. Oh, there looks to be
Those are just me in the chat.
Okay.
I'll interrupt you if there's a question.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So variable format and naming consistency. Names should indicate what give an indication of what you're collecting. So for example, if you're collecting race, a good variable name would be race. A bad variable name would be like var2 or variable2, or I have in one of mine was like SCR_2. And it's like, well, I don't know what that means on the back end when I'm looking at this. it might not seem like it's a necessary thing, but for, again, as a statistician, being able to know what variable I'm working with and understand kind of the information that we're trying to collect helps a lot with data cleaning, creating new variables, or even just doing our analysis. If we know what this variable is specific, it's a lot easier to pull up and be like, we want to look at race, like what was the variable name, and then having to go to a data dictionary to be able to pull like, oh, race is var2 and age is var5. It's a lot easier to then just be able to know like race is going to be race and age is going to be age, as an indication of what the actual information is related to that variable. And then format is really important. So when you're having making like choices, so for example, a yes and a no, you don't want for one variable or for one question, 0 to be no and 1 to be yes. And then in another question, 1 to be yes and 2 to be no. That's not consistent, that's not standardized. And so it can make it, again, more difficult on the back end as we're trying to conduct analysis or even doing data cleaning because it's not consistent throughout, right? One that gets me is that the control and intervention. And I think a lot of statisticians, we automatically like control is 0 and 1 is intervention. And it's happened to me where those are switched. And even, on a study that I've been working on for like 2 years, I'm still go back and check the code just to make sure that it really is 1 control, 0 intervention, because it's not intuitive usually with most statisticians. So you want to think like things that are negative, you would want to have be the 0. So like a non-smoker or somebody who doesn't drink or no to diabetes. You usually want yes to be 1 and no to be 0. It's just, again, more intuitive in what we naturally do. Say we're recoding anything that is like not or no is always 0. And then what we're looking for is always 1. Or, if we're doing something kind of ordinal where there are more options, like, again, the no is 0. And then you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. Another big one is date and time format. There within REDCap, there are different ways that you can format the date. There are different ways that you can have the time formatted. You can have date and time together, and you can have them be 2 separate questions. And so the best thing that you can do, again, for the back end for us is keep it consistent. So if you're collecting date and time for some things and just date for others, I would keep date and time separate and then, still collect the date. But if you're collecting a lot of just date and times at the same time, have them collected in the same field. But again, keep it consistent. So if you're putting in that you're doing month, day, year, make sure every single one of your dates is month, day, year. If you're doing time, hour, minute, minute, all the time should be hour, minute, minute. And that's simply because for us on the back end, dates are always a little bit tricky to work with whenever you're doing any kind of data cleaning. And usually if we're given dates, it's because we're trying to find time differences between 2 dates, right? So there's a lot of data manipulation that we have to do. And so if everything is the same, we can create something called like a function to be able to format each of the dates in the same format that we need it to, or it's even coming in the same format. So then we can compare the 2 without having to do a lot of data manipulation. Again, it just makes it easier on the back end and also on the front end, because if you switch it up within different forms, within different questions, more likely that you were going to make a mistake as you're entering in the information. That has definitely happened to me when I wasn't the one that created the form, and I've gone in, I'm like, oh, I put this in wrong because on this form it's month, day, year, and on this form it's year, day, month, or whatever. So this is a way to, again, make data cleaning easier on the back end for statisticians, but then also for you that you're not making any of these errors on the front end. And so this is just kind of very basic starting points on what you would want it to look like. So I'm going to go through and talk about how we can collect different data and the do's and don'ts. Based on if you've gone to the data management, we did like a birth weight data set. And so I'm going to show you how to collect a lot of this data within REDCap. And if we have time, I'm actually going to ask for some participation so you can help me decide on, tell me how I would enter this information into REDCap. So I am going to end this and put it in here. So I'm sure, can you guys all see the REDCap? Perfect. Okay. Do I have any questions so far? Perfect.
There aren't any currently in the chat, but if you have a question, please feel free to type it in or unmute yourself.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. So you guys have all seen, if you guys came to the original REDCap, introduction to REDCap, you usually have, this is what the homepage looks like, and then you can go to my projects. So you can see here, I have quite a few projects. What's really cool is that if you are working on multiple different projects, you can organize it into these different folders. So again, it's easier to kind of pull all the information that you want. And then you can have your project title. So I have this REDCap one. And so we have project setup here, and you can have this main project settings. So you can see here, I have instituted using longitudinal data collection with defined events. If you want to use surveys, this is not something I'm going to go really into, but the survey feature on REDCap is fantastic. It's really nice because you can, if you're sending out questionnaires to participants, you can actually set it up, and you have to send like different questionnaires at different times. You can actually set it up automatically with days to like have questionnaires automatically sent out for you, given when like the first one from like a baseline to like 6 months. So that's a really cool feature that you can have in here. It makes it easier as a coordinator for you to make sure that information is being collected.
There's a question about how to access REDCap if you don't currently have a REDCap account through the university.
You have to request an account through the university, and you have to do some initial training, which is great because it kind of, again, goes through a lot of the basic information, and it doesn't really take that long. I would say it takes about, I want to say less than an hour to go through the training, and it is really, really helpful. So that's a way you can request the REDCap through the university. If you just go to like redcap.ucdenver.edu, I can log out. I don't want to log out because I'll maybe show you at the end on how you do that. So here we have, no, okay. You can design your data collection instruments and enable. So here, you can click this, and this goes to the online designer. So this gives you I've created these instruments. So again, I think in the REDCap introduction, they go through like how you can create an instrument. So we're not going to really go through that today. But here, this is where you create new instruments for your project. Back in project setup, this is where you would enable different option modules here. So you can do repeating instruments. So this is saying, for example, if you have a serious adverse event or adverse event form, you can do repeated instruments. And so you can put in, just keep adding in that instrument every single time you have a new adverse event. This is actually better than the way that I used to do it. And I used to just make a really long form that has the same information that you ask for an adverse event like 20 times. I literally did that for one of my projects back when I was a research coordinator. But this way, if you do repeating instruments, you can just have this adverse event form, and then you can just keep adding that form every single time you have a new adverse event, which is different than having it a longitudinal module here. So scheduling module, doing longitudinal data. And that's more here where you have this define my events. So here we can see within this study that I've created, we have a baseline. And so you have, this is event 1, offset days. So this is like how many days from, and then the range. So you can say like plus or minus a certain amount of days. And so here I added a second time point where I say it's 182 days from the beginning, plus or minus 7 days. So meaning that within the 182 days, it could be a week before, a week after. And this is based off of that data that I asked for, that I said I was going to collect at, I think I said 26 weeks gestation. So 26 weeks pregnant. I wanted to collect glucose and systolic blood pressure, as well as the PHQ-9, which is a like mental health survey. So I have these events, and then you can do an event label. So I'm going to show you again how to do this. So we're going to add a new event. Oh, sorry. So I'm going to pick another one that's going to be, so about a little more than 40 weeks. So I think that's what, 210 days, plus or minus, I'm going to say for 21 days. So say 3 weeks on either side. And then I'm going to say, I could say, end of study. So say I wanted to collect some additional information. And so I have the dates, my offset, and then event label. So I can say add new instrument. And so now I have 3 different time points. And so why is this easy? Why do we like this? We would want to come up here to designate instruments for my events. So I click here and you can see I have all of my instruments here. I have demographics of mother, the patient health questionnaire depression scale, the PHQ, the laboratory results, and then demographics of the infant. And so here you can begin editing. And so you can here, we can click just these check boxes to show which forms we want to occur at which time points. So here, the baseline, I only need to collect this information of the demographics of the mother at baseline, but I wanted the PHQ-9. So this is, at the beginning, when they, first find out they're pregnant and they enter the study. I want to do it at 26 weeks. That's usually after they do the big scan, as well as this is usually when they do the glucose testing for diabetes. And then I want to also check to see how they are after they've given birth. And then the demographics of the infant, I'm just really interested in that at the end. And then laboratory results, I can say I'm really interested at before. And then at that 26 weeks, this is when we get their glucose information that we're trying to collect. So I can click all the places that I want and I can click save. So then you can see here, we have this questionnaire that we can be created at all of these time points. And so if we go here, we can add a record. So I'm going to just here add a new record. So then you can see this is record 1. And then you can, these little dots shows these are the time points that I can complete this questionnaire. So this is for a specific person that we're adding in. And then you can just click here, go to it, and then be able to answer those questions. Looks like we have some more questions.
Just me again.
Oh, okay.
I'll interrupt you if there's more.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to stay on top of it. Okay, so that's how you can create a longitudinal. So again, if you're going to be asking the same question, or the same questions over time for your study, create a longitudinal database. And it's also easier for you because you only have to create the form one time. You don't have to create it, lab, baseline, lab, 6 months, lab, 12 months, or however it's going to be. You just have to create that one time and then be able to fill it in for all the time points. And you can add in time points if you need to. Obviously, try not to do that in the middle of the study. This is why we want to practice and have people test it out. So therefore, once you go to development, from development to production that you don't have to go back and make any changes. You can, but again, you really don't want to do that in the middle of the study because then if you add questions, not everybody's going to be able to answer that question. So you're going to have a lot of missing data. So this is why testing is so important. Okay. So going back, let's look at this demographics of the mother. So this is what I was talking about. This is what you don't want to do. So if we look at this, okay, we just have age. We have no validation. This is just a text. So this gives you every single type of field that you can use. Again, if you came to the introduction to REDCap, they really went over this very, very well. If not, this was recorded, so you can review it in the next couple of weeks when we add it to our website and our YouTube. But you can see here, I have nothing. I don't have a field note. I don't say age of the participant. Do I want it in age? Do I want it in weeks? Do I want it in months? I'm not giving any units. I don't have any validation here. So somebody can fill this out and put literally anything in here, and there's not going to be any warning. There's not going to be any indication, and it's just going to be messy on the back end. And so you don't, this is not what you would want to do, because we can just put that in. That could be the answer that you can submit. And again, that doesn't tell us anything, information that we want to know. What you do want to do is you could do something here like a drop down where you have all the ages that you're interested in. Say we're going all the way to 68. You could go all the way to 100 or 105, however long you want to go. So therefore, there is no mistakes. It's 62 is going to be 62. And also what I did here, because these are the choices that you can put whenever you do a drop down, or a single answer or multiple answer field type within REDCap. So usually I would do, this is what we see on the back end, this first part. So that is the value, and then this is the description. So what I did here is I just made it be the same, because here we're asking about age. So I made our value on the back end for the statistician or for you be 18, and then the description for that value is 18, saying age. What you really should have done here, what I should have done, and this is a way that, hey, I should have put years here so that we're indicating the unit is years. I also have it here in the field note. But say you did want to improve this and you just wanted people to be able to put in the age, okay? Say you're like, I don't want to do this whole drop down. We have a wide range that could exist here. How can we make this better on the back end for a statistician? Any thoughts? The first thing is you would want to look at this validation option. So you can see here, there are a bunch of different formats that you can look at here. So we have all of these dates. We have date time here. We have email, we have integer, we have letters, we have number, all of these. We have even decimal places with the number. So here we can say, we're going to do a number. Okay. And then you could put a minimum and a maximum here. So say you have a study and your age range is 18 to 45. And then here we're going to do years for that field note. So now when somebody's going to enter this information, we're going to save this here. So now we have years, and when we enter information, we can go here. We're going to add new record. Now I'm going to fill out this information. So now if I did something like 17, I'm going to get an alert. So this helps reduce errors on the back end if you can fix it on the front end. Because one of the things I'm sure a lot of people who are coordinators don't like to do is you have to be able to go back in time or back into the electronic health record or back to the participant if something is missing or the range isn't correct or something doesn't look right, to try and go fix it later on. This way you can say, oh, I'm supposed to be within this 18 to 45 range. Oh, this is actually supposed to be 27, not 17. because we'll come back to this. So I'm going to come back here up to designer. Oh, validation for age. Yes, that was great. Okay. So that's a way that if you did want to do a write-in, that would be helpful. And again, if I were to go back and put years in there, put a character, or letters, it will come back with that same error saying, no, this is not what we want. So here I'm having two examples of the field name. What's great with REDCap is that you have two different types of options. So you have these choose all that apply buttons. So this is where I can pick two different. I can pick white and Asian in terms of race. And then for marital status here, you just pick one or the other. So there's only one option. So you want to be careful that you don't choose a choose all that apply for something that only should have one answer. Because again, you could have people are human and people make mistakes. And so you know, for marital status, there's really only one status that you can have. And if I chose this to be, I come back and I choose this to be multiple answers, I could have somebody that says they're widowed and married. But like you can't be, I guess you can be widowed and married, but we want their current status. So they can't, if they're married, we just want them to say that they're married because they could maybe be widowed and they used to be married. And so they could just internalize that as like, well, I was married and I still consider myself married even though I am widowed. Or you can say, I've been married and divorced and widowed, but we're asking specifically, you want to know the marital status right now. So again, being careful on how you choose these field types, that if you only want one answer, make sure you're only giving the option for one answer. And here I have a variable name, marital status. So therefore on the back end, when I'm looking, I say marital status. And then here I'm taking into account the missing information. So say we don't know this information. So we have 998 as saying don't know, and then 999 refused. So a good thought process here is when you're picking a value for missing, it's something that you can be consistent throughout the entire database. So depending on what kind of information you're collecting, maybe 998 might not be the best option for a value for missing, because maybe in one of your other data points that you're collecting, 998 is a possible value. So again, you would want to make sure you pick something that can be consistent throughout. So then again, on the back end, as a statistician, we know, we've already discussed, we've already been told missing or don't know is 9999 or 9998. And then so it's missing, meaning that we're not going to be able to get it, versus missing, we need to go back and get this information because it was never collected. That distinction, again, is really important when we're doing data management and data quality checks. What you don't want to do is here with mother's race is, again, var2. Don't love it. Not fun. This tells me nothing on the back end. So then I have to remember in my head, if I ever want to pull up race, that it's called var2. A better would be something like mom race. So if you remember, we're also going to be collecting infant race. And so again, being able to distinguish that this is the mother's race and not the child's race or the infant race. So this is a better option than just a random name. Okay, so different formats. So here we have two dates. My favorite thing about REDCap is the fact that you have these calendars, or you can click today. It's very, very nice, especially as a coordinator, to be able to put in this information. But you can see here, the formats are different. And we don't want that, because say that you maybe aren't just going to be putting this in, and I'm like, oh, I know that this should be on the 11th. and I put that information in, and I don't think about it because this is how this one went in. It was month, day, year. So then I put it in here. But on the back end, it's going to be wrong because it's not the right format. And again, it makes it hard on the back end for us if these are different. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to fix this. This is great because the date of enrollment, I called it date enroll. And I actually want this to be month, day, year. And then I also want to put that here. Any way that you can give the information more than once for whoever's entering the information so mistakes aren't made is always positive. So now I fixed that. Those are both the same. And so here we have these two variables, mom smoke and mom vitamins. And so this has to do with what I talked about of, again, the formatting of 0, 1, 0, 1, 2. So here, if we look, we have 0 as no, 1 is yes, 2 is don't know, and 3 is refuse. So you can see here we are collecting, if we don't know if it was refused, we're collecting that like missing information, saying whether it's missing because we weren't able to get that information versus it's missing because it was never collected, it was never asked. So we have included that missing information, and this one is saying 0 and 1. But for here, I made 0 yes and 1 no. That's very confusing. We don't love that. And therefore, because again, on the back end, I'm going to potentially make the assumption that everything that is 0 is no, and everything that is 1 or more is like yes, or, multiple different options. We also didn't take into account if this is missing. You didn't say that they refuse to answer, or, we don't know. We're not collecting that. So say the answer isn't yes or no, you're obviously not going to be able to answer this question. So then on the back end, we're going to say, hey, this is missing. And you're like, oh, no, it's actually not missing. They just didn't know if they were taking vitamins, or they didn't want to answer. But then, a year later, when we're coming back to review this information, I'm probably going to come back to you and be like, hey, this person is missing this question. Can you answer it for me? Because again, we don't have an indication that this is just missing information versus we just haven't collected it yet. So I'm going to fix this. We want 0 to be no and 1 to be yes. People also do sometimes no is 2, but we don't like that. We want no to be 0 more often. Okay. Next information we're collecting is height. And so here we just said mother's height. But so you could put in, if I wanted to, 5 feet, 10 inches. Or I could put 5, 10. Right? There are multiple ways that I can enter this information. There's no guidance for me as the coordinator to say how you want me to enter it in this information. So I can decide to do it however I want, which is not, again, on the back end, not good for, this is just messy data. Not saying that statisticians, we couldn't go through and parse this out and clean it. We totally can. But this takes a lot longer to clean and fix than having here, we're saying we want the mother's height in feet, and then we also want the mother's height in inches. And so if we go in here, we have the validation. We're saying this is an integer. I have the minimum and maximum, and I have the field note here. So I have made this as easy as possible so that there's no mistakes when we're entering in this information, that if something is entered in incorrectly, we can get a flag to say, hey, what do you mean this person is 10 feet tall? That's an unusual thing. You can, and say the person is 10 feet tall, you can still keep that information in there, but it gives a, hey, this is a high value, or hey, this is a low value. So on your end, you can fix it if it needs to be fixed. And if not, you can leave it in there and it's fine. But again, inches. And then again, we want the mother's weight in pounds. So we're asking specifically prior to pregnancy. So we have pounds. And here I will say, I just did a validation of integer. I have the pounds. I say pounds here, but I don't have a minimum and maximum. But I guess you could potentially put in like 1,000 or 2,000 pounds because that seems not likely to have a 2,000-pound patient. But again, because you want to have the units, because if you don't have that there, somebody can think that this is kilograms or meters, right? So you want to be as clear as possible. And then this all goes into the data dictionary and the code book, which is something that we really enjoy as a statistician. I use the code book all the time within REDCap to be able to look and see what the questions are, see what the format's supposed to be, and all of this information. Has anybody seen what a code book looks like from REDCap? I'll show you. So this is here. So it's great because we have the variable name, the label, and the drop down. So this is the value plus the description. So you can have this for everything. I actually like looking at this a lot more than the data dictionary, simply because this is a lot more user-friendly than the data dictionary that comes out as an Excel file. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show you is how to create a matrix. So this is the Patient Health Questionnaire Depression Scale, or PHQ, or PHQ-9, because there are 9, or I guess this one is the 8. So for example, all of these questions have this scale of not at all, several days, more than half the days, and nearly every day. So if you have something like this, which a lot of scales have, so like the perceived stress scale, the PHQ-9, a lot of these mental health scales have these, not at all, several days, more than half the days, or 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, so on and so forth. What I think is really helpful, more on your end, less on our end and on the back end. It's just a lot easier for you guys in the front end. You can make this whole matrix. So you have the title header. So that's this whole part here. So we say over the last, this is the question, how often do you feel? And then this is the label. And then you can, again, have the variable name. So each one of these is its own variable. So again, you want to be specific. So here we can say this is PHQ-8 and this is 1. I pulled this. What's really cool about REDCap is that it has, you can pull in a lot of these validated scales right into REDCap. But if I'm being honest, I would have changed this to be little interest. So therefore, I know this is the little interest question, or I might just call it little interest within the PHQ-9 instead of just 1, 2, 3. I might call this feeling down, trouble sleep, feel tired, a more descriptive variable name. I'm going to leave this just because this is from pulled in. But it's really great because you have all of these different field labels. You can put in the variable name, and then you just have the choices one time. So instead of creating 8 different fields with the same choices over and over and over again, it's just one big field. You just put the choices in once, what the answer format you want it to be, and what the main group matrix name is. This is really, really great. It's really awesome on the front end to do. And I could show you what that looks like. So it looks like this. So it's really, really nice. And you can click very easily going through. Awesome sauce. Also on the back end, what's really nice for us is having these chosen, either incomplete, meaning that it's not, hasn't been completed at all. That makes it red. But say this one, we've only completed some of it and it's unverified, you can click this unverified, which then makes it yellow. So we can say this is incomplete, this is partially complete. And then if you say we do something that is complete, we'll put green. and then we have the green there. So, and it's great for you on the front end, but it's also great on the back end for statisticians when we're doing something like a DSMB report where the DSMB wants to know about how many forms are completed by participants, which is something, again, that I've been doing. And this is a way that I can say, hey, this is how many of the demographics were completed by all the participants versus what were incomplete or what is like missing. Being able to have this, that, hey, this is just incomplete. And then these means that the gray means we haven't even opened it yet. Are there any questions? Okay. I want to add a field here, but I want feedback from you guys. I want to collect blood pressure of the mother. What should I do?
You would make two variables, systolic and diastolic.
Awesome. So should I do a text box? Should I do a choice button? What do you think?
Think text.
Yeah. So here I'm going to say you're right. So we want spelling that wrong. There is an I here. Okay. What else do I want to do? What do you think my variable name should be? Should I call it var or lab 1? There you go. I like this one. Kristen, perfect. Oh. Okay. Should I do anything else? Do you think I should do a validation? Very good. Validation. I'm going to pick integer. And then what about, is there anything else I should be doing? Maybe some here in the field note. What should I put?
Our unit.
Our unit.
Yes.
Good job. So millimeters of mercury. I would also like to put that here too, because again, the more places that you can have, the better. So here we have it, we want millimeters of mercury. And so what's really great is that you can also do this copy field. So I know that I want it to be very the same, very similar because it's the same unit of measurement, but instead I want diastolic. So I'm going to do DIA. And then I would probably, what's cool is that if you have something that you can do multiple times, if you copy it, SAS automatically puts like _2, which can be helpful if you're doing like collecting medication information. But here again, I can just fix it to say diastolic blood pressure and everything else stays the same. So it's a really quick, easy way to put that information in. Okay. I am done. Are there any other questions? Oh, I like the BP_SYS too, Ellen. That's a good, I like that one because it's even smaller. The smaller and more informative it can be, the better.
We do have one question in the chat, which is how to input data on REDCap. Is it possible to create link to instead of REDCap login? So maybe Joey, if you have a little bit more direction on that question.
Yeah.
But Samantha can take a stab.
So there are a couple of ways. So say you can actually, if you have, it seems like I think you're talking about potentially survey. So you can collect survey information. So I can enable this as a survey. And this can then go out. So you can create any.
We don't see your screen anymore, Samantha.
Oh, shoot. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sharing. Sorry. So here, what I did, let me go back. Cancel. So say I want the PHQ. I can enable this as a survey. So what would happen is I can say I'm creating this as a survey. I can put in the survey instructions. So this is an email that will then go out to the participant that you can put in here. So this is kind of like what the email will look like. And then this is going to be, or actually this is just having to do with the survey. So this is the name and we're saying you can please complete. You can add in any additional information. There's all of this stuff that gets sent. So I'm not going to go through all of this because that's a lot. But here I can then go to, I forgot, it's been a while, but you can then here with scheduling, I can create a schedule where I can have the different, I'm not going to go through this, but you can then send out the questionnaire, the survey to participants for them to complete. They don't have to like enter into REDCap. But if you are just doing forms like this, like data collection forms, and yeah, you have to log into REDCap as the clinical coordinator to be able to enter that information. Does that answer your question, Joey? Because you can do a questionnaire and send that out. Make scores. How can we make REDCap to add scores for each participant at the end of a survey? For example, for the PHQ-9, if you wanted to create a score, you would do a calculated field. So you would create the equation and you would add up all of, for example, for this, I think for PHQ-9, you would want to add up all of the numbers for every single question. And then you would create the calculation at the end. So whatever the calculation is, you would put that here in the calculation equation. Now, if you need that for yourself on the front end, I say for sure do that. If it's something that we can just do in the back end, I would recommend that more. Just because if you remember in the introduction to REDCap, calculated fields actually take a lot of space and it makes the REDCap slower. So unless you absolutely need it for, say you need it for a dashboard or you need it for anything that you need specifically that you can't get from your statistician, I would just leave it and have that be a calculation done by your statistician. Because what's great is that if you have a statistician that is with you from the beginning of your study, you can get, weekly or monthly reports of kind of all of this information that you need. Any other questions?
Thank you, everybody, so much for joining. I put the attendance survey in the chat a little bit ago. So remember, if you fill that out, you are entered into a raffle to win one of 6 $75 gift cards, and every additional entry adds your name in additional time. We will be posting the recordings to our website link in the next week or so we can come back and refer to these if you are interested. And if you do have any follow-up questions, please attend our office hours tomorrow at noon, and we'll be happy to continue the conversation about REDCap, R programming, SAS, working with a statistician, or anything else that you might be interested in talking about.